Welcome to the Self-Centered Podcast.
It's officially happening.
It's here. We're here. And yeah, we've been working on this for almost 2 years.
Oh my God, that's insane.
No joke. We've been working on this for almost 2 years now.
I don't think I've ever been that committed to something in my life before.
I know that's been a really beautiful part of this process for us and has been really nice to grow together. I think it's probably important for us to give our audience a little bit of context into who we are, what we're about, and why we started this thing in the first place. So Olivia and I tend to rant a little bit. So I think best way to do this, let's just share like top 3 things to know about us. First and foremost, I am a restaurant kid. I grew up in a restaurant. My parents owned them throughout my childhood. It's a core part of my identity. And also I was just always surrounded by acts of service, hospitality. It was really important to my parents that they created this safe space for people from all walks of life in Philadelphia. Second thing, that I am a cycle breaker. In my family specifically, there's a long history of addiction, mood, and personality disorders. So it's been a journey to break those habits and those patterns. And then I also think that does kind of translate to my career as well. I think my career on paper probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, and I'm okay with that. I started in fashion. Now I'm an executive coach, and that's a pretty big leap, but also in the way that I do not tolerate poor leadership. I'm not afraid to burn a bridge when the moment calls for it.
Period.
A third thing is I'm just really fucking passionate about helping women who have culturally and industry disruptive ideas, make them a reality, make them happen, and also stay well, stay sane, stay here, stay present, protect the peace while they're doing it. And so I think that brings me to why I'm here and why we started this. I think both of us are obsessed with the interconnectedness of the self, who we are, and how we interact and exist within the systems, within our environments. Most of the problems that we're facing today, it's not an either or. And I think that's what we want to approach all of these conversations with, is bringing that interconnectedness, that nuance into what we're doing here to reimagine a better way of doing shit.
Yeah, I think for me, I, from a very young age, have been obsessed with why are people the way they are? I've really wanted to deeply understand what lived experience have you had that's led you to this conclusion or led you to this component of your identity. I think a lot of that was born out of feeling on the outside looking in often. And so just wanting to better understand. On top of that, I love to solve problems. If somebody's running into a wall, if they're feeling some sort of friction, I want to figure out, okay, well, what does it look like to come up with the next step forward? I don't think you need to have it all figured out, but how do you just figure out that next one thing? I think a lot of figuring out what the next step is true to you. Your next step will look very different from somebody else's depending on their lived experience. So I cannot do surface level conversation. If you meet me at a bar, we're probably going to get to your trauma pretty quickly.
Same girl, same.
That is just the natural way it goes. Yeah. But I think creating spaces or creating an openness to go deep and to be vulnerable, I try to lead by example in that. I'm pretty comfortable sharing. And I think that has created such rich relationships in my life and a wide spectrum of relationships as well. And I think what I love about our dynamic is I am so hyper focused on the self that I often forget about the system. So I think the way that we pulled this together and what we both bring to the table makes this a very kind of rich, exciting, interesting, unique experience happening inside of a podcast.
I agree. You're my favorite person to solve problems with. Together, we're unafraid to get messy. Welcome to the Self-Centered Podcast, a space where centering the self challenges the systems around us. In this episode, we're asking if the systems that made us unwell have also taken over the language of healing. How do we find our way back? With Van Newman bringing a personal perspective and Mina B unpacking the systems, we'll double tap on what it means to reclaim well-being on our own terms. Let's get into it. I think best place for us to start is where we're at personally with our own mental health. Mm-hmm. For me, which I don't think this is going to be a surprise to you, I honestly feel like I am stuck in this never-ending emotional hangover. I feel like I constantly need to be resilient. Whew. And it's for my clients. My job is to metabolize and solve and be a sparring partner for people's problems and figuring out what to do next. And so I'm kind of in this, I just feel like I'm stuck in this state of grief. And of course I have good days, but it's been hard. I would say.
To be in a ongoing state of grief in multiple areas of your life takes a toll. So yeah. I think the emotional hangover piece makes a ton of sense there. And I think that goes back to, I think for me and where I'm at with mental health, wow. Like I am in a fundamentally different place than I was even 6 months ago. I think that like for me, mental health has been, if I think about my life in rings and you think about like work as an outer ring, relationships as an outer ring, where you live as an outer ring, I've been so focused on figuring out how do I set up my life in a way where my mental health can be improved based on the work environment that I'm in, based on the relationships that I'm investing in, based on where I live. And now that I have like sorted through all of those things, all I am left with is myself.
Is yourself.
Like there's nowhere else to project the friction to other than inside of myself. And I get so frustrated because every single therapy appointment I have comes back to the reality that like I just need to learn how to be kind to myself. And I need to learn how to reprogram how I parent my inner child in a way that is kind and nurturing. And that is just not something that comes naturally to me. Like so much of my success has been attributed to how critical I am of myself and the expectations that I have of myself. And my therapist has diagnosed me with perfectionism.
Well, to no one's surprise.
Yes.
The rigor that this woman has is unbelievable. Yeah.
And I think the hard part of putting that down is like I do attribute so much of my success to that model. And the question is like, can I achieve what I want to achieve? Because I do think ambition is something that is just like a part of me.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think the other part of it is like accepting things that are true about yourself instead of wanting to be somebody else. Like it is true that like I am an ambitious person, and instead of being frustrated that I have such high expectations of myself, like how do I acknowledge that and still be kind to myself at the same time?
How do you make friends with that? How do you make friends with that truth? That's something I actually tell my clients a lot. If there are parts of you that you find frustrating, try to be friends with it, because in that process you tend to be softer.
Yeah.
With yourself.
And I mean, it is so easy for me to give grace to other people. And so
and
much
I know
of it is
that about you.
How do I take the grace that I'm so willing to give to other people and bring it to myself?
Give it to yourself. Let's zoom out.
Yeah.
And talk about what is keeping us up at night. What problems within the realm of mental health we hope to help solve through this conversation. I think things that stood out to me in our conversations with Mina and Van, number one, the conflation of healing and performance, which absolutely has been influenced by social media. And it's been influenced by the tools and the products that are built and the ones that we're prioritizing. So things like Aura rings, where now sleep is performance. It's not healing.
Yeah.
It's not soft. We approach everything with this like hyper discipline to be better. I'm curious how that's impacted you in your life.
Ooh, yes. So there are 4 things that I know to be true about myself that like make up my identity. The first one is self-expression. Like if I'm not able to distribute or communicate the things that I am feeling or experiencing, I feel constricted. And so I've struggled many times with content creation or posting on social media where like there is a therapeutic result of sharing and releasing. But the fact that other people on the other side get to engage or not engage with that, what I am learning consistently is like, I don't need to be concerned with how people engage with it.
Yes.
But the system is literally set up for engagement.
No,
and like
it conditions us to care about those things and to prioritize those things.
And there's so many metrics against those things that makes it really, really hard. So I think like I'm a Leo. Like I grew up dancing. Performance is like in my blood. But I think it was because there was this like pit of external validation that just felt like it could never be fulfilled. So consistently trying to navigate what does it look like to express, to honor the like performance nature of myself while also healing.
Even when it comes to things with my physical health as well, like I don't ever want to have a scale in my home. Like I really am deterred and incredibly frustrated by anything that creates these like metrics and the way that that's built into everything that we do now, even with like doing this podcast, right? So I feel like I'm in this phase of my life where I'm trying to really just detach and get rid of all of it. But I think I want to call out something that Mina specifically said, because I do think it kind of summarizes what we're talking about in a really beautiful way. She said something about how what's labeled as mental health typically masks a deeper urge to remain functional, productive, or palatable. Hey, it's Tori. When you hear that's your cue for a double tap. A quick moment from our guest interviews that adds context and color to what you're hearing from Olivia and me in the studio. To help us explore the systems that impact our mental health, we sat down with Mina B., a licensed therapist, author of Owning Our Struggles, and founder of the media company I'm So Mature. Her work lives at the intersection of mental health, workplace well-being, and cultural care. A former social worker turned consultant, Mina challenges the ways we've turned healing into performance and invites us to choose joy and presence instead. In this episode, Mina keeps it real about the core importance of challenging the systems we've inherited.
I would say that bad mental health, or just recognizing that our mental health is not in its healthiest manner, is when we find that we are not able to function in life. And so that means when we're experiencing circumstances or situations that are so debilitating, it is impacting us mentally, emotionally, and physically, because mental health is just a part of it's a part of an ecosystem. And so I think often people think that you can have good mental health, and just because you're having good mental health, that means all areas of your life are good. When I think of what it means to have bad mental health, I'm looking at it from a perspective of what is causing debilitation in your life. What is impacting your ability to function properly? When it comes to quality care, of taking care of yourself and feeling whole, what is impacting that and what is getting in the way of that. So I think it's really important for people to just view it from a lens of mentally, emotionally, and physically. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do I land when I think of quality mental health? And if you're under a 5 for all three, then that might reflect that your mental health probably isn't in its best state. And you may want to pay attention to what's causing that. But I think quality mental health or good mental health is really when a person is able to function despite experiencing stress. Because I think the common misconception is that people think good mental health means you're not going to have a bad day anymore. You're always going to be happy. You're always going to find the silver lining in life. And that is not true. People who have higher levels of self-efficacy, which means a belief in oneself that you can achieve your goals, people who have higher levels of resiliency, which means their ability to bounce back from hardship, studies actually show people who have both high levels of both of those things experience quality mental health. It doesn't say that they're not experiencing adversity at all, but their perspective about the adversity they're experiencing and how they choose to combat that adversity or how they choose to mitigate it plays a role in why their mental health is what it is. It's why it's healthy. It's why they're still thriving despite the world crumbling, despite their lives feeling like it's
Relatable.
Right. Because we're all operating in the same society, right? And there are some people who are struggling despite that. And there are some people who are thriving despite it. And we are all experiencing the same pandemics, the same global issues, the same racial traumas. We're all witnessing it, right? Everything that's happening in our current society, we are all witnesses to it. And some of us are having direct impacts, a direct impact to those things and an indirect impact. But it's still a form of adversity that we're all experiencing. And some of us are getting through it in one way and some others are not. And so I think it's just really important for people to recognize that quality mental health has nothing to do with you always being happy. It really just has to do with how you choose to function when you are faced with circumstances that may not have an outcome of you being happy.
Yeah.
And can you thrive despite that?
Another thing that I'm going to speak to, the palatability piece feels very relevant to what I'm going through right now with my family. In particular, I think I'm an only child, and so I often, and my dad has struggled with addiction. You know, these are things that we speak about often. And so in the dynamic of me and my parents, I think I always force myself to be the palatable one, to be the one that is regulated, that is going to therapy, that is articulate, that is not letting my emotions get in the way so that I can be the facilitator of healing our little pod. And something that I'm about to challenge myself to do by bringing in a therapist and a mediator into family therapy is allow myself not to be palatable, not to be the one who has their shit together, because I've been doing that since I was a child. And it's been really weird just recently in therapy, like memories that I haven't had that have not come up in a really long time have been coming up. And I feel this anger where it's like, wow, I've been working so hard on myself. And that's great. And it has allowed me to break those cycles. But also give it a fucking rest. Like, it's also okay for me to go in and share my raw thoughts and be angry and be messy and not have it all together. I'm curious if that word resonates with you, because we've had conversations that feel relevant to this.
Deeply. I mean, I think a guiding light for me, a compass for me is, okay, I'm entering a room. What are the dynamics? What are the personalities? Who are we dealing with? Okay, how do I show up in a way that eases this for everybody in the room? And it is not something I consciously think of, but it is just how I navigate in spaces. Like, if I'm like, okay, there's a really big personality in the room, I don't need to be the big personality. Oh, I'm around a bunch of introverted person. Okay, let me rise up. I think from a family dynamic, I think like when I was younger, I was extremely emotional. Like I wore every single emotion on my sleeve, and that was reflected back to me as being dramatic. There was no space to like honor those emotions. It was like, okay, like you're doing too much essentially. And so as I've gotten older, I have like muted my emotional reactions to things, where I'm at a point where I don't even know how I feel.
How you feel
about a thing, because I have discounted that mattering. Like I'm so much more interested in getting to like the end result, whether that's out through whatever it is, than honoring all the full spectrum of emotions that I'm going through, because I'm not even recognizing them. I've like created this like stopgap where they can't get above a certain point where I would have to acknowledge them. I think like I've had a few experiences where I've have like been forced to communicate hurt just because like it was consuming my life.
Yeah.
Other than that, I find it really hard to have direct conversations, really hard to like be confrontational. And I think like people pleasing is the underlying thing at play there. And there's a lot of narrative around people pleasing being like a toxic trait, because it means that like you're not actually showing people like who you really are, because you're not actually telling them how you feel. And no, it's a coping mechanism.
I was going to say, but that's a result of your environment.
Exactly.
And the environments that you had to interact with and live within.
I did not have models of people coming to the table and being like, hey, like when you did this thing, it really hurt me.
Yeah, it also seems like you're tying your emotional capacity and processing to the perfectionism as well.
Yes.
Where the emotions are not valid or worth time unless they serve the end goal.
Yes.
Shit.
Uh-huh.
My friend.
Yeah.
The number one thing that I encourage people to think about is how to not allow other people's stuff impact how we see ourselves. I always encourage people to think about, especially when we are operating in the healthcare system, what does advocacy look like for you? Because having those types of experiences can make us feel like we have zero agency. It can be disempowering, and it can also make us feel as if there's nothing that we can do. But there are things you can do. You just have to figure out what resources you need. You need to figure out who can help you achieve those things. And you also need to figure out, what does advocating for yourself look like? So it could mean next time I see this provider, I'm going to speak up more. It could mean I'm actually not going to see this provider anymore at all. If this person doesn't see me, if this person doesn't value me, it's time to move on to someone who can. So that's another form of self-advocacy that I encourage people to think about. But I also encourage people to figure out, what does it mean to own who you are and be okay with, I guess I want to say, engaging in healthy conflict. Not everyone is going to give you that invitation. And so can you find the courage to say, I don't need permission to do this. I'm going to say it anyway because I give myself permission. And so this is what I mean when I say it's twofold when we're operating with systems. There's a level of self-advocacy that we need to push back against inequality and inequities. And that requires us being bold enough to speak up and say what needs to be said.
So I think this actually does bring us to the next thing that really stands out to me, and it's the labeling that we do. And I think social media, big part of this. Imposter syndrome, gaslighting. In my opinion, and in my experience, working with people very intimately, oftentimes when those labels are used, the utility of it is to kind of defer an issue or make an excuse for something, or to almost weaponize it. And so what I mean, I'll go into the excuse part of it. Some of my clients will constantly come into our sessions and say, oh, imposter syndrome. I didn't do that because I was feeling imposter syndrome. I'm like, no. We can't stop there. What is really happening here? Because oftentimes with imposter syndrome, for example, it's more specific negative thinking patterns that are rooted in things that you experienced or were modeled for you as a child. So like, for example, people pleasing and over functioning in relationships, which you're putting the other person at the center there. Emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. So that's related to the gaslighting piece, which again, I think gaslighting is a way to, and what I mean by weaponize is to say, this is a bad person. Like this person, the cancel culture type nature, that thing, where it's actually a lot harder to say, I am being psychologically abused. And this is a part of this person, and this is a part of the dynamic of our relationship. And also admit that maybe you play a part. And this is the part where the palatability, right, of things. Social media has made us all feel like we have to put like one quippy label or word or whatever it is to something to explain where we are. And that is a huge fucking problem.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
It's so dangerous.
It's dangerous, it's short-sighted, and it dilutes the human experience.
Yes.
Like, we have so much going on beneath the surface, which, again, going back to, like, my desire to deeply understand people, again, is not to label. How do we challenge some of those so we can better understand each other? Like, all of it for me is to drive deeper connection to each other, and the labels keep us separate because, like, it puts you then in this box of like, oh, I'm not going to engage with that at all. Like and that's where like the boundaries become a problem inside of themselves because it's like, oh, that person's a gaslighter. I don't want gaslighters in my life. And it's like, gaslighting is like a behavior that happens. And like, again, why is that happening? What's coming to play? And what is the role that you may be playing inside of that? And I think like it's creating just like so much disconnect in a way where I think relationships are suffering.
I'm sure all of us at some point or another unintentionally might have gaslighted somebody.
Yes, absolutely.
And we have to be able to admit that. Because what you're saying, too, I think is related to tolerance for other people as well as ourselves. Being kinder to ourselves.
Yes.
Being able to sit with the fact that, oh, this is happening in my life. And I'm letting it in some ways. Of course, there are things that can be out of your control and that are really hard to get yourself out of. But I do think that our inclination to quickly label something as, you know, a binary of some sort or something that is just really, really high level is a big part of why we cannot tolerate each other or ourselves. We cannot be with ourselves.
Yes. And I vehemently believe that as a society, like, we can only treat other people to the extent that we can treat ourselves, right? Like,
absolutely.
While I am able to give people more grace than I'm able to give myself, there's also resentment at play because I was able to give that person grace that I wasn't able to give myself, versus if I am able to figure out what does it look like to be kinder to myself? What does it look like to nurture myself? There's no longer that resentment when I'm giving it to other people. Again, when we're talking about we want to imagine a different way, a different world, a different reality, so much of that for me is, I think, the work that we do on the self creates an unbelievable ripple effect. And like in Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, I have a terrible memory, so when I do remember something, it's like it stands out. But one of the lines in there, she said, there's no such thing as one-way liberation. When you free yourself, you inherently free other people.
Yes.
Or when you are being honest about the fact that somebody hurt you, they then have to grapple with the fact that like, oh, wow, I hurt this person and they were vulnerable enough to come to me. And like, how do I look at myself inside of that? Like, liberation is what I'm in this for. And freedom, if we're going back to like what I said, the 4 things about me, freedom is so important to me. I believe that like I'm working towards a version of myself that feels liberated and feels free to show up.
And I think this also brings up the point about how you can start to change these things in different aspects of your life, and then it will have a ripple effect in your own life. Like for me, for example, I feel like my practice of being my most authentic self, or like most regulated self, has actually happened through my career. And that's because of the work that I do. And I think my clients challenge me, and I feel such a responsibility to take my own advice.
Yes.
It's like, if I'm not practicing what I'm telling these people, I'm a fraud. How can I go in and tell these people to negotiate, confront, and navigate these really uncomfortable things if like I'm not able to do that myself? You can start to create change in your own life in one aspect. It doesn't have to happen all at once. I often think we put so much pressure on ourselves to make it happen all at once, where it's like, just focus on one area and get really good at that, and showing up the way that you want to show up, and being free and liberated and exactly who you are, and then start to translate that to other areas. And I think that's like a lot kinder way to think about it.
I agree. I also think something you said about like keeping promises to yourself has a lot to do with integrity.
Yeah.
And I think when you have those moments of, okay, in my work life, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna stand up for this, or I'm gonna speak out about this, like that is an act of getting to a more integrity first version of yourself. And once you have that feeling of what it feels like to like be true to yourself and actually like show up in your full truth, whatever it is, that feeling is addictive as
That's
hell.
the dopamine hit we should all be chasing.
Exactly. Like, and I know what it feels like, and I know what I desire, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to flip to the other area of your life and do it again. So often you have to relearn these lessons over and over and over again. But I think like if we're talking about like optimizing for anything or any type of metric, like the metric is like, how can I have the highest level of integrity with myself in whatever context it's in? And the reward that you reap from that, I think, is something that I do want to optimize for. I think like that's the type of life that I want to live.
Yeah. Can you go to sleep and feel proud of yourself? Be like, I like her.
Yeah. I'm curious, going back to your point at the start about the emotional hangover.
Yeah, this is...
Yeah. I think given everything that we've talked about, given the palatability conversation, kind of like, where do you see relief? Do you see like a light at the end of the tunnel for relief from this at all?
No. No. And I think that's what's so hard about where I am right now, is no, not in a big way anyway. And I think I've been trying to, because I am someone who is just relentlessly optimistic and hopeful and always searching for the bright spots. And so I've tried to stop fixating so much on some sort of like destination, or this is going to be when I get out of this haze, and more so have tried to lean into just creating joy when I can. And it's funny because it feels, I never thought I would be this way, but my dog that I recently got is such a source of joy for me right now in this really hard time, where it almost feels like it's healing my inner child in a lot of ways that I didn't know that I needed, because I am able to give this other creature the love and the care and like the foundation for things that I just wholly believe that everyone and everything deserves.
Yeah.
And it is just this uncomplicated love. And I think I needed that. There's no singular moment where I think I'm going to be out of the haze that I'm in, but there is such joy in raising this little puppy. And that is what I'm trying to focus on. And all of that to say is I'm just trying to focus less on a destination and more on just like, what are the small ways that I can do it. But I do think that this is related to something that I wanted to call out about what Van said about resilience. They made a really, really interesting point about challenging the virtue of resilience as a cultural ideal, because it almost allows or gives permission to our systems to not provide care or to not see certain people or acknowledge the existence of or to misinterpret and misrepresent. And that statement made me really consider how much value and weight I put on resilience.
To help us explore mental health and the self in this episode, we sat down with Van Newman, a writer, designer, and cultural strategist who has spent the last decade creating digital, physical, and narrative spaces where people can feel more like themselves. From platforms like Somewhere Good to the Writer's Room, Van's work blends systems thinking with lived experience to ask, what does it take to feel safe enough to be honest? In this conversation, we dive into the importance and the challenges of finding community in an ever-changing landscape.
I'm Van. I am an East Coaster, also grew up in Maryland, was in New York for almost 10 years, did a year in LA, and now I'm hanging out in Panama City, Panama. I am, above all things, a writer, primarily right now working as a screenwriter, which is definitely, I think, was my pandemic clarity epiphany. That's actually what I want to be doing, pivoted my whole life. But I've been in this place where, I think specifically regarding the state, like where the country is with trans rights, it's been a tough few months, I think for all of us, for some of us more than others. And that was a large part of why we left the country. I think, if I'm being fully transparent and vulnerable, I think so at the beginning of the year, my passport was actually expiring, and I was in the process of waiting for my court date to have my name and gender changed. And so initially, I was kind of holding out, waiting to renew my passport so that I could change it with the correct information. And it was really disheartening, realizing that there is no future at this present moment in which I'll have, ID that reflects who I am. Both from, just like that's just messed up. And also I think from a safety perspective of the more I medically transition, the more I feel it's unsafe to carry documents that don't reflect, the gender that I look like. And so, and feel like, once we realized that, and it was like, okay, well, let's just get a passport, but also thank God that I was in a place where I wasn't waiting to get a passport, because a lot of trans people now don't have passports at all. And so we were like, let's get this and let's get out of here. And I actually, just last week, my court date happened, and I actually, in the state of California, just got my name and gender recognized. But I didn't realize that you need to have, it was a sweet moment of excitement. We take the wins where we can. But I didn't realize that in order to change like a state ID, you need an updated social security card, and social security cards were also banned from being updated shortly after passports. And so I've been in this place where I both feel like, well, F this place. I'm not living there. I'm not paying taxes there. Like, I don't, like, a trans people don't exist. Like, not even my tax dollars, I don't feel safe here. But then also there's this feeling of, and I think in that I can often be very like 0 to 100. And like, I think I can be like, I'm going to leave all these platforms and I'm going to leave the country. And then I think I'm also in this place where I'm also trying to figure out, well, when you can't 100% leave and you can't just be like fully give it the middle finger and 100% walk away, because that just can't happen, not overnight anyways. What is my version of chipping away at what can I change? How can I feel safe? Yeah, we can't get passports, but what does my community need on a day-to-day level? What do I need on a day-to-day level? And it is, and I have been in this place kind of figuring out, maybe right now it's not the mountains that I can climb, but what are kind of those smaller hills, and also looking less structurally and trying to look more, communally, and figuring that out as well, which is also tough because community is eroding. So that's also been a moment of realizing, I kept being like, I want to get involved. I want to get involved. I want to do something. And then I'd be like, but I don't know where to go. And every organization is like, the get involved button is a link to a petition or a donate button. And I'm like, I want to do so much more than that. And then I think, well, most things start when you have a community, a group of people, and you're like, what do we need?
We put such an emphasis on surviving. Just keep on keeping on. And I really do think that we need to completely reconsider where that sits in our priorities. Because up until this point, like today, resilience has been number one. That's strength. Resilience is strength. If I am the person that people know, oh, she'll be fine, she'll get through it, I am fucking killing it.
Yeah.
But I'm quietly killing myself.
At the same time.
What are your thoughts on that?
I've placed such a high value on my own level of resiliency. I think I view it as like a superpower of mine, of like, it doesn't matter what you throw at me. Like, I will figure it out and I will make it work. I will make it happen. And I think on the system side, it's how do we hold systems more accountable to providing the support needed. Like, I think in a corporate context, right? Like, you have that star person on the team that, whatever you throw at her, she's going to take it. I'm talking about myself, and make it happen. And yeah, that's great. But how do we reward or implement built-in things that like lessen that load? I'm coming off of 2 weeks of PTO, which I have never done in my career, like ever. But also like the mentality of that person of like, how am I going to be perceived if I take that amount of time off? And I think that's on the system side. I think on the self side, I think it is deconstructing my own belief of what it means to be resilient. And I think like, we're ticking down these 4 things about myself. Like, the other thing about myself that I know to be true, and I think this is the one that I struggle with the most, is like, rest is integral to my survival. Like, I'm a huge human design nerd. I'm a projector. Projectors are non-energy types. Like, I am quite literally not meant to hustle. And like, however, my natural instinct is to hustle. And like, I have spent so much of my life discounting how important rest is. To me, rest is a form of resilience.
It is. It's the source of resilience. You cannot be resilient sustainably without rest. Key word, right? High level, systemically, I think that we talk about rest and joy as these things that are easy. These things, oh, you can't wait to get into your bed, or you can't wait to go to the beach on the weekend and be with your friends. And that is just not the lived reality and experience for a lot of people. Rest, if you did not have it modeled for you, or it was not valued by your parents or your community or whoever you were growing up around or are around today, you're going to see that as something that's very uncomfortable, something that you're almost like opposed to.
It's an inconvenience.
It's an inconvenience.
And because it's unproductive.
No, and I think we all need to learn how to rest. I need to learn how to rest.
To me, it is joy and rest. I would rather inconvenience myself for a little bit to experience connection. I know these things are true about myself. I need self-expression. I need connection. I need freedom. And I need rest because I know on the other side what I'm going to get out of it is more versus inconveniencing myself for things that just deplete me more. That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And I think too, there's another point here about managing our expectations. To go back to the resilience piece, I think we have to stop expecting resilience all the time from ourselves and from everyone. Van spoke to this from personal experiences, felt very much like they were in the throes of feeling this way.
It is this now like just larger structure in the same sense of, I don't like paying healthcare, but maybe you have to do that. And so, and I think because I think the way that we've seen tech in the short amount of time it's been, around, it feels not as fixed and, or as like, I feel like it feels like there should be more hope than, take the healthcare example, where I think we've all kind of accepted that that's going to like fuck us one way or another. And I think I want to feel differently about Instagram and the internet, but maybe I'm grappling with this feeling of maybe it's not different. I don't know. And so all that to say, I think it is hard, or it has been hard, I think, writing a newsletter where I'm trying to talk about getting off these platforms. I started that newsletter before I left the country. And so, I wrote that not knowing that I'd moved to a country where almost every business communicates on WhatsApp, which is owned by Meta. I can't find any access to trans healthcare. And so I have to find trans accounts on Instagram and like message them for emails and like contacts, to figure out how to get healthcare. And, and so, and even thinking about tools like translation tools, like living in a Spanish speaking country right now. And so it is, it's been hard, I think, trying to be vulnerable, and in that maybe wanting to tell a story that feels heroic, or inspiring, and then maybe realizing there's maybe no, I don't actually know what I have for y'all. And so I think that has been interesting to kind of put oneself out there that way.
How wild is it to expect Van, a trans person, to be resilient right now? Mm-hmm. The fucking audacity. And it pisses me off.
Yeah.
When I think about it and I sit with it, it pisses me off, and it made me even angry with myself because of how I value resilience and how that also is part of how I even prioritize friendships. Mm-hmm. Who can be resilient with me? Mm-hmm. And that's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's not okay. I think we all need to question what our expectations are around resilience, because sometimes leaving the country, which Van did, is a natural response and coping mechanism. That is not abnormal. The circumstances that we are living in are what's abnormal.
Yes.
And we put too much pressure on ourselves and our reactions, when really, in this case, this is an environment issue. Mm-hmm. This is a systems issue. And it's got to stop. But this brings me naturally to the next part of this conversation, which I'm really excited to get into. But what are the biggest opportunities for change in a systemic way, in personal lives, whatever it is? First and foremost here, and this was something that Mina called out, and I had never really heard someone talk about it this way before, but we need more softer and cyclical models of healing embodied by parents, leaders, teachers, or any other role models.
Well, I think the self-care industry is speaking to a culture that they know and understand, which is American culture. Community care is not a core foundation of American culture. So business owners who are engaging in wellness and figuring out how to operate it and operate within that system, remember they are also a part of this society, and they're building from what they know and understand, right? And so when we're understanding the system, we have to understand it on an interpersonal level, our family as a system, our friendships as a system, the workplace as a system, and then thinking of the institutions that we have to interact with as well as a system. That is why I loved this field and chose it, right? And so it comes from my own upbringing. It also plays a role in why I'm a social worker and the field in itself and what it teaches us. So I do think that when we're seeing this $1 trillion industry continue to grow and it still be very I-focused, I think a lot of that just has to do with culture and people not even knowing what is the roadmap to a we-focused society.
And I think that's the important piece or part about this, because imagine if we equipped parents to be able to speak to this, where when you go online, depending on what age children end up online or teenagers, whatever it is, this is you being exposed to a different set of values, different ways of being, all of these things. And it's on you to take what we've given you, the tools, the values that we've shared with you in our family or in our community, and to critically assess. I think that that's a conversation that should be happening in homes and with children.
And I also think the critical assessment, like something that's disturbing me so much right now on social media, are the comment sections and the way that people are having these like reactions to things in front of the person. Critically assess in your text messages with your friends or in conversations with your friends in your private life. The person that you are critically assessing doesn't need to hear that assessment online and think pieces about them or in their comment sections. Like that is not, I think that is a really disturbing step that we've taken inside of this. Yes, critically assess within your own bubble. Like you don't need to do it to the person.
Yes, your opinion does not necessarily say anything about their character.
Yes.
And social media has allowed us to conflate the two.
And it's just this like tornado of what's so dangerous about so much of what we've been talking about, of like understanding what's underneath beyond the labels, labeling other people, using social media for performance or attention or external validation. Like at the end of the day, that's what this boils down to. Okay. Let's leave it there.
Yeah. we have to make sense of everything. If things don't make sense immediately, we're like, something's wrong here. They're crazy.
Right? So it's a slippery slope.
It is really a slippery slope.
When I'm being myself, which I think probably only my partner, my sister, and my cat have seen, I think it's like there's a lot of singing, a lot of strange dance moves, and so I think it's often in a place where like I'd say like I'm myself when I just don't have to really think twice about any thought that comes in my head. And I think particularly now in a time where I think we're always thinking twice, 3 times, 4 times about what we're saying, how we're saying it, who we're saying it to, is it being recorded? I think like it's like the dissonance is like it's like that gap between the spaces in which we're ourselves and the spaces in which we're thinking about who we are. I think is even wider than ever. And so I'd say that those are moments where I'm myself, and then I also think that I'm most myself when I'm the least distracted. And so I actually I have this quote on my desk by Henry David Thoreau that says, let us spend one day as deliberately as nature and not be thrown off by the track by every nutshell and mosquito's wing that falls on the rails. But I think about and I think about this a lot. I think I've had to think about being more present when I'm in this more creative, generative career where like I actually have to like not consume a lot so I can, you know, sit down and write a script and like create these really detailed worlds in my mind. And I think to do that type of internal world building work, I you know, I can't be on Instagram a lot. I can't be like in other people's heads and in other people's worlds. But I think that even in that space of thinking about how to be less distracted, I find that when I'm not constantly being served ads about my identity being tied to me wanting to buy this thing, or my identity wanting to be tied to watching someone whose art looks cool, and now I'm like, should I make an art like that? Or, you know, I think that when I'm not distracted by things that like the algorithm is giving me, I feel like I'm having the most original thoughts and in that feel the most myself.
To get back to the point, because I think you mentioned this about bringing care into the workplace and into like private businesses. So this feels like I think they have the biggest responsibility in terms of creating integrated care systems where people have more access to tools for care, let's say practitioners for care, or just having some sense of community for care, and doing so without diluting the quality of the context. If we increase access to mental health care, we also need to ensure that it's not diluted, because that's what we're seeing play out on social media right now, where yes, it is amazing that there's an increased access to this information, but oftentimes it's diluted, it's inaccurate, and there's not really like a shared reality in any way, shape, or form. And what does everybody have to do? Everybody has to go to work. So work is where you can provide that quality context and that quality access to these things. And it's just not a priority today, unfortunately. But like, I even think about it as, you know, to give a very specific example of what this might look like is perhaps in our performance reviews, we look at mental health as kind of a signal for leadership development, for growth at the company, or we carry that as something that is as important as productivity. Is this person like taking care of themselves? Are they able to be vulnerable and to share with their manager, right? And of course there are like boundaries that you want to set, and it's important to bring structure so that the person knows how to communicate those things to a manager. But I often think leaders and managers, they're caretakers in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They have an opportunity, and that's a huge responsibility, and I get it, but not everybody should be a manager. Mm-hmm. And so I think people who want to be in that position, like, I think a reframe could be really helpful. How can I show care? How can I show support? How can I bring structure so that they know how to communicate to me what they need in order to like process or be productive or whatever it is?
I think at the end of the day, companies are optimizing for making money. And I think like I understand why this is not a prioritized thing, because it is not clear how this directly impacts the bottom line. Now, I think that if your team is well, then they can perform and then more money is made. I think that's an easy leap to make. But I think the tricky part about leadership and putting that responsibility in the hands of leaders is like they are but humans as well, and bringing their own stuff into it, which is why I think the piece about structure is so critical. Some leaders create that space, some don't. So if somebody doesn't have a leader that's coming to the table with that energy, they're going to feel some type of way, or they're going to be left behind because they don't have that system implemented for them. I would love to see it implemented across the board. I also think it's like, what parts are a part of the conversation? Because I think another really challenging thing, I worked in like the benefits and leave side of things at a company. I started my career off in HR, and like when you start to bring the life stuff into a work context, it gets really ugly really quick. And I think like from a structure perspective, if it's like, let's look, how much time did you take off in this half of the year? What did that look like? Let's make sure we optimize more for that. It's got to be like in the right context.
The solution, it has to be bespoke in a lot of ways. I agree, though, that there needs to be some incentive through government or policy. Within capitalism, businesses are actually legally required to increase their profits year over year and to make money. So to your point about the bottom line being really important, facts. But if maybe there's some incentive where also the well-being of humanity is as important.
Yeah.
Economic growth only happens if we are alive and we continue to exist and people can work, which, I mean, if you look at women in particular, more and more women are leaving the workforce right now because it is just too hard. I think a lot of women are tired of being resilient in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I also think that businesses can start to create more data around the connection in terms of like if in a performance review where you're bringing in structure, you're creating boundaries around what you're monitoring from a mental health perspective, but you are able to start seeing, oh, wow, okay, when they take all of their vacation days, this person performs better. Like if you're able to have that, those things can impact policy and politics oftentimes, because at the end of the day, politics is driven in a lot of ways by money and power.
I also think another area can be around development, right? Like it's not so much like sorting through what's going on underneath, but like what are we building on top of? What skills are we strengthening? What are we creating access to that gives people new models, new methods, and so on? So I absolutely agree. I think like we spend 70% of our lives at work. So like there's got to be something happening in there. And I think like, again, and through this lens of like reimagining what it looks like, that feels like a no-brainer area and opportunity that like probably wouldn't cost that much to do and the reward would be high.
So we talked about a lot of things. What do we want people to chew on?
Yeah, I think depending on where you're entering this conversation, I would say if you are super early on in your personal development, mental health journey, I think spending time to learn the things that are true about you and things that you need is a really great place to start. I think like figuring out those 4 things for myself really gave me a foundation, a measuring stick for everything. I think if you already understand yourself and you know what's true to you, I think like exploring inside of those buckets, like how to expand, like, okay, how do I expand in rest? How do I expand in connection? And then I think also, message to me, what does it look like to take small steps towards the thing versus needing to be perfect at doing it?
Yeah, I've been having this conversation with one of my clients recently, and it's been eye-opening for me and also incredible to see how just this small reframe has shifted her relationship with herself and with her mental health. And it's by viewing the journey to being a healthier person, of a better like mind, body, as a devotion to yourself. So going back to the discipline piece, we often focus on discipline, that's how you get there. We're really devotion to yourself is what's required, and prioritizing yourself and caring for yourself first. And then I think also in the process of doing that, it's not letting yourself look at it as this other opportunity to self-optimize, to be better. Oh, I need to constantly be better. No, you just need to be devoted to yourself. And that looks different in all seasons of your life. And that is a much kinder way to look at it. And then other questions that I think are really important to leave people with, to go back to the resilience piece and how we value that. But I think the question of like, if true care shouldn't require resilience, then why are we still designing our lives around how much we can endure instead of how much support we can access? I'm going to go home and I'm going to take that one with me. But like, what would change if we stopped celebrating survival so much and we started building for regeneration? Again, cyclical, soft, nourishment. That's what we're going to leave people with.
Wow.
Shoot.
I know my next topic for therapy.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Same. All right. That's it.
Thanks for listening to the first episode of Self-Centered Pod. Tori, it has been a joy.
You're a joy. Love you so much.
Love you too.
Hold my hand. My girl.
That's it for this episode of the Self-Centered Podcast. We hope this conversation helped you think a little bit differently about your connection to yourself and the connection to the systems that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. If this episode resonated, the most self-centered thing our listeners can do is leave a review or a comment, and make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter to get access to resources, tools, and the uncut, unfiltered interviews that we do with all of our guests. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay a little self-centered.